She let a stranger and his daughter sit at her table in a crowded cafe without knowing. He was a silent millionaire, or that one small act of kindness would change her life forever. A sketchbook, a crayon, a butterfly, and a moment that turned into a future she never saw coming. What started as a rainy afternoon led to a proposal, a family, and a painting that would never be finished. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell us where. Are you watching from now? Let's jump into the story. It was the kind of rainy afternoon that made the whole world feel quiet. Outside, soft drops tapped against the windows like a slow lullaby. The sky was a dull shade of gray, the kind that made colors fade and time feel slower. People rushed past with umbrellas, their shoes splashing in shallow puddles. Inside a cozy book cafe tucked between two old brick buildings, warmth hummed gently. The cafe smelled of cinnamon and fresh paper. It was small but full. Students stared into laptops. Friends whispered over chai. Someone sneezed near the pastry case. Chairs scraped. No, spoons clinked. Life moved in tiny, busy sounds. In the corner by the window sat Nora, 24. Quiet, tired, her hands were stained with ink. Her sketchbook was open in front of her, resting beside a half-empty cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. She wore a sweater that had seen better winters and boots that leaked at the toes. Still, she looked out the window like she was trying to find something beyond the glass. Nora drew softly. She sketched a butterfly, its wings wide and free. It hovered above a field she wished she could visit. Drawing helped her breathe. Didn't pay rent, but it kept her from falling apart. Art was her way of staying whole in a world that often felt cracked. No one noticed her. No one ever really did. She didn't mind. It was better that way. Less questions. Fewer expectations. The table beside her had 2 empty chairs. She liked the space. It gave her room to think. Then the door opened. A man stepped inside, tall and careful. His coat was damp. Rain clung to his shoes. But what caught Nora's eye wasn't him. It was the small girl by his side, maybe 6 years old. Curly dark hair, tiny hands pressed tightly over her ears. Her eyes darted around the room, wide with discomfort. The noise was too much for her. The voices, the cups clinking, the steam from the espresso machine. She clung to the man's leg like it was the only safe place in the world. He leaned toward the barista. His voice was low, but urgent. "Is there anywhere to sit?" Was it any word? She's getting overwhelmed. The barista gave him an apologetic. "Look, sorry, not a single seat. We're packed today." Nora paused. She looked at the girl. She knew that kind of fear. She'd felt it before. In crowds. In loud places. When the world moved too fast, without thinking, she closed her sketchbook. She cleared her throat softly. "You can sit here," she said. "There's room." The man turned, surprised. His eyes met hers. They were gentle. "Unsure? Are you sure?" he asked. Nora nodded. "Of course. She looks like she needs a little calm." He thanked her quietly and led the girl to the table. The child sat beside him, still trembling. She kept her head down, her shoulders tight. Nora reached into her bag. She pulled out an old box of crayons. The cardboard was soft from use. The colors were short and worn, but still full of magic. She slid them across the table. Toward the girl, "Would you like to draw something?" Nora asked. "I always carry these with me." The girl looked up, uncertain. Then slowly, she nodded. Nora tore a blank page from her sketchbook and laid it gently in front of her. "What do you like to draw?" she asked. The girl whispered, "Butterflies." Nora smiled. It felt like the right answer. "Then let's make the prettiest butterfly in this whole cafe," she said kindly. She handed the girl a yellow crayon. The child hesitated, then leaned forward, tongue poking slightly from the side of her mouth as she began to draw. Nora watched her, heart warm. The girl's hand still shook a little, but the lines began to form. A butterfly, bright and brave. The man watched too. He said nothing, but his shoulders lowered. He exhaled slowly. Something in him softened. A woman at the next table glanced over and rolled her eyes. "Really?" she muttered. Just letting strangers sit now? Nora didn't flinch. Her voice stayed calm. Sometimes people don't need space, she said. They need kindness. The woman scoffed and turned away. The girl giggled softly, a sound like spring in the middle of winter. Nora beamed. The man took out his phone and quietly snapped a photo. Not to post, just to keep a butterfly halfway drawn. Child slowly relaxing. A young woman offering color to someone else's storm. He looked at Nora. She glanced back. Their eyes met for a moment. Something passed between them. Not romance. Not yet. Just a sense of understanding. Nora gave a small nod and looked down again at the drawing. The rain had slowed. The sky outside remained gray, but inside the café, at one small table by the window, a different kind of light was growing. It was soft, simple, easy to miss, but it was there, and it was only the beginning. The rain had started again, thin drops. Fell like whispers onto the city's quiet streets. Puddles rippled with each step. Streetlights flickered on early, casting long shadows that danced across wet sidewalks. Nora walked alone. Her coat was thin and too short for the chill. Her boots soaked through with each step. She held her sketchbook close, wrapped in both arms like a fragile treasure. The cafe felt far behind her now, but her mind kept drifting back to it, to the girl with the butterfly, to the quiet man with kind eyes. She didn't even know his name, but something about him stayed with her. Her breath came out in small white clouds. She turned down a side street lined with old shops. She moved quickly, head down. Then she heard footsteps. At first, she thought it was her imagination, but they were steady, a few paces behind her, matching her rhythm. She glanced back, without turning her head. No one was close, but the sound remained. Her chest tightened. She quickened her pace. So did the steps. Nora's heart began to race. Fear crept in like fog. She turned the corner, hoping to lose whoever it was. Then she collided with someone. Hard. She gasped and stumbled backward. Whoa, sorry, a voice said gently. Steady hands caught her arms. Nora looked up. It was him, the man from the cafe. Elliot. He looked just as surprised, but his eyes were calm, kind. Are you okay? He asked. Nora nodded, still catching her breath. I thought someone was following me, she said, voice shaky. Elliot looked over his shoulder. The street behind them was empty. I'm sorry, he said softly. That was me, Nora blinked. You? He nodded. I saw you leave alone, and it's getting dark. I just wanted to make sure you got home safe. She stared at him, unsure what to say. That's very kind, she said at last. He offered a small smile. Would you mind if I walked with you? He asked. She hesitated, then nodded. All right, she said. They walked side by side in silence for a few blocks. The drizzle softened, but the wind picked up. After a while, Elliot spoke. You were drawing something special in the cafe, he said. Nora gave a quiet laugh. I try to draw every day, she said. It's how I stay sane. He didn't respond, just listened. I lost my last freelance contract months ago, she continued. Got turned down by 2 galleries this week. I'm behind on rent, but I keep drawing. I guess because it's the one thing I still believe in. Elliot looked at her eyes, gentle. Sometimes that's enough, he said, holding on to one thing. Nora smiled faintly. They stopped outside a narrow building with peeling paint and crooked steps. This is me, she said. Thank you, she added, for walking me, and for letting your daughter draw with me. Elliot nodded. She needed that moment, he said, and so did I. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small card. He handed it to her, just a name. Elliot, no number, no job title, no logo. Nora looked at it, puzzled. When she looked back up, he was already stepping away. Good night, Nora, he said. Then he was gone. Nora stood there, holding the card like it weighed more than paper. Inside her apartment, the air was cold. The heat barely worked. She slipped off her boots and sank onto her small couch. Her sketchbook sat on the table open, waiting, but her hands were too tired to hold a pencil tonight. The next morning came with a sharp knock. Nora opened the door to find Mrs. Kendall, her landlord, standing with her arms crossed. "You know what day it is?" she said. Nora nodded. "I just need a little more time," she said softly. Mrs. Kendall frowned. "You've had time. Rent was due last week." Nora's voice dropped to a whisper. "I have a gallery appointment this afternoon. If they accept my work, I'll have the money." "Oh. And if they don't?" Mrs. Kendall asked. Nora couldn't answer. The older woman sighed. "You have until Friday," she said. "But if there's no payment, you're out." She turned and walked off. The door clicked shut. Nora leaned against it. Her legs shook. Hours later, she walked to the gallery. She wore the nicest thing she owned. A navy coat with a missing button and a scarf her aunt had knitted years ago. Gallery was quiet. White walls, tall windows, clean floors. The receptionist glanced up. Nora stepped forward. "Hi," she said. "I'm here to submit my work for review." The woman looked her over. "You've been here before, haven't you?" Nora nodded. "The one with the butterflies?" The receptionist gave a cold smile. "We're not looking for hopeful sketches," she said. "We need proven sellers, not dreamers." Nora blinked. "I see," she whispered. The woman turned back to her screen. Nora walked out without another word. Outside, the sky had turned dark again. She wandered without a path. Past bookshops. Past people holding hands. Past the life she wished she had. Her feet led her to the café. The same table was empty. Light spilled across it. Soft, golden, quiet. Nora stood outside. Her breath fogged the glass. She pressed her palm gently to the window. Inside, the table waited, but today, she didn't go in. She walked home, silent, tired, and unsure what tomorrow would bring. It was Monday morning when the email arrived. Nora sat curled on the floor of her tiny apartment. A blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her hands gripped a mug of lukewarm instant coffee.
Ouch!
The window rattled from the cold wind. The room smelled faintly of pencil shavings and old toast. Her phone buzzed once. She glanced at the screen. An email from an unknown sender. Subject line read, "We saw your art." Nora hesitated. She tapped it open. Inside was a short message. "Come by for a conversation," beneath. The words was an address. A gallery uptown, one she had passed by many times, but had never dared to enter. No name, explanation, just the invitation. Nora stared at the screen. Her first thought was that it was a mistake, or worse, a cruel joke. Duh. She closed the email. Opened it again. It hadn't changed. The rain outside tapped louder against the window. She looked around her apartment. Eviction notice still hung on the fridge. Her sketches were stacked in a basket by the bed. After a long pause, she stood up. A few hours later, she stood in front of the gallery. Its glass front shimmered under the afternoon light. Gold letters above the door read, "The Haven inside, everything." Looked clean, soft white walls, tall ceilings, quiet music played from hidden speakers. It smelled of wood polish and fresh paint. Nora pushed the door open. Her boots squeaked on the floor. A woman behind the front desk looked up and smiled. She wore a sharp blazer and a kind face. "Nora Rivers?" she asked. Nora blinked. "Yes." "Been expecting you," the woman said. "Right this way." Nora followed her down a long hallway. The walls were lined with soft lighting and framed art. Her heart thudded with each step. At the end of the corridor, the receptionist opened a set of glass doors. "Please," she said, "go in." Nora stepped inside and froze. Her artwork was everywhere on the walls, under spotlights. Framed with care, her butterflies sketched in charcoal and crayon, drawn in ink and soft watercolor. They flew across canvases in every shape and shade. She gasped. In the center of the room stood Elliot, He wore a navy blazer with sleeves rolled up and soft shoes. No coat, no umbrella, only a smile. Nora stared at him. "You," she whispered. He nodded. "I run a foundation," he said. "We support emerging artists. We also fund this gallery." Quietly, she looked around again. The drawings. Her butterflies. "How did you get these?" she asked. Elliot stepped forward. "You left a few behind at the café," he said. "I asked them to hold on to them. I hoped you might come back. But when you didn't, I asked them to watch for you. I had a feeling your story wasn't finished yet." Nora's eyes filled with tears. "You did all this? 'Cause your art speaks?" Elliot said gently. "Right. It brought calm to my daughter, joy to that moment, and beauty to a place that needed it. I saw something honest in it, something kind." Handed her a folder. Inside was a contract. Simple, fair, clear. Her name was typed at the top. "This is for your first solo show," he said. "Full support, venue, materials, everything." Nora's hands shook. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," Elliot replied. She looked up at him. "Why me?" "Because you didn't wait for someone to notice you before you gave," he said. "You just gave. Crayons, space, color, that matters." Nora blinked, trying to hold in the tears. "Elliot," she said quietly, "I'm no one. I can't even pay rent. Galleries laugh at me." He stepped closer. "That's their loss," he said. "It ends now." She nodded slowly. "Yes." She whispered. A real smile spread across her face for the first time in days. The receptionist returned with tea and biscuits. Nora sat with Elliot for an hour. They talked about her process, her dreams, her fears. He listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions. But he never rushed her. Before she left, he said one more thing. "There's no catch, Nora," he said. "Just keep creating. The world needs more voices like yours." That night, she sat on her bed in her apartment. The room looked the same, but something inside her had changed. She opened her sketchbook. On the first page, she drew a butterfly. Its wings stretched wider than ever before this time. It flew not away, but forward. A year had passed since Nora's first gallery show. The seasons had changed. Winter melted into spring. Spring bloomed into color. And somewhere along the way, Nora found herself living a life she had once only drawn on paper. Each morning, sunlight spilled through the windows of a bright studio in Brooklyn. The walls were covered in butterflies, some painted, made of paper, others drawn in crayon by tiny hands. Nora now taught art once a week at the local community center. The classes were free. The children came from all walks of life. Some were shy. Some had loud voices and quiet hearts. But every child who entered her classroom left with paint on their fingers and hope in their chest. She moved through the room, gently guiding a boy who was learning how to mix colors. She knelt next to a girl who had drawn a rainbow with no sky. She smiled as a group of kids built butterflies from tissue paper and glue. In the back corner, Elliot sat quietly on a bench. He'd come early to pick up his daughter. His eyes watched Nora as she worked, calm, kind, steady, just as she had been that day in the café. Lila, now a little taller and a lot braver, came running through the door. She wore purple overalls and carried something in her arms. Wrapped in brown paper and tied with string, Nora turned and smiled. "What's that you've got there?" she asked. Lila handed it over. "Open it," said. Nora untied the string and flipped the frame around. Inside was a blank white canvas. She blinked, confused. Then she turned it over. Written on the back, in Elliot's handwriting, were the words, "Will. You be our forever." Art. Nora looked up. Elliot was already walking toward her. He held a small velvet box in his hand. He knelt beside Lila, who now stood grinning from ear to ear. "You brought color into our world," Elliot said. "You gave us peace when we had none. You gave Lila her butterflies back." He opened the box. Inside was a simple ring, soft blue stone set in gold. "Will you keep painting this life with us?" he asked. Not just for now, but for all the days ahead. Nora could barely breathe. Tears filled her eyes. Her heart raced. Her hands trembled. Then she nodded. Double quotes. Yes, she whispered. Lila squealed and wrapped her arms around both of them. The classroom filled with quiet claps and wide-eyed smiles. The children had stopped their art. They knew something special had just happened. Later that night, the center was empty. Nora stood alone in her studio. Moonlight touched the canvas in front of her. It was the largest one she had ever owned. She picked up her brush slowly. Gently, she began to paint. First, a small girl with curly hair, standing in a field of color. Then a tall man with soft eyes. And steady hands kneeling beside her. And beside them, a woman with golden hair. Her hands stretched forward, holding a paintbrush. Adding light to the sky, she titled the painting The Unfinished Painting, because life was still being made, still being colored, still full of space for new moments. Weeks later, the painting hung. In her second gallery show, people stopped in front of it. They stared at the sky. They looked at the family at the center. And they always paused at the bottom corner, where one part of the canvas remained untouched. White. Waiting, Nora stood near the back of the room, holding Lila's hand. Elliot stood beside them, quiet and proud. A woman in the crowd turned and asked Nora, "Why did you leave part of it blank?" Nora smiled. "Because love isn't something you finish," she said. "Something you keep growing." The woman nodded and walked on. Nora looked at Elliot. He squeezed her hand gently. Lila leaned close and whispered, "Can we draw one more butterfly?" Nora knelt beside her. "Of course," she said. She handed Lila a crayon, and together on a blank piece of paper, they began again. Because kindness never ends. It only begins and grows, one brushstroke at a time.